They called humans the gentle giants of the galaxy, a species so naturally peaceful that they had never fought a war among themselves for over 3 centuries. When Princess Zaratil of the Velthari Empire agreed to marry Captain Marcus Chun in a desperate bid to prevent the annihilation of both their worlds, she thought she understood what she was getting into. She was wrong. What the galaxy didn't know, what even Marcus himself had forgotten, was that human peace wasn't weakness. It was a choice. And when that choice was taken away, when everything a human loved was threatened, the universe would remember why ancient Earth legends spoke not of gentle giants, but of sleeping dragons. The wedding would save 2 civilizations. The honeymoon would nearly destroy 3. Princess Zaratil pressed her palms against the viewport of her royal transport, watching the human ship grow larger as they approached the neutral station. The massive vessel looked nothing like the sleek, organic curves of Velthari design. Instead, it was all angles and purpose, built for function rather than beauty. Much like the humans themselves, she supposed. "Your Highness," her advisor Kethmar spoke softly behind her. "The Council wishes to remind you that this union represents the survival of our entire species. The hegemony grows stronger each day, and without human military support, I understand the stakes, old friend." Zaratil turned from the viewport, her silver hair catching the light in patterns that shifted with her mood, currently displaying deep blues of resignation mixed with threads of golden determination. The question is whether this human truly understands what he's agreeing to. The marriage contract had been negotiated through diplomatic channels for months. Captain Marcus Chun of the Terran Defense Corps would wed the Velthari princess, creating an alliance between their species. In exchange, humanity would provide military support against the Krillian hegemony, whose expansion threatened to consume both civilizations within a decade. What made the arrangement unusual wasn't the political marriage. Such alliances were common throughout the galaxy. What made it remarkable was that it involved humans at all. Humanity had spent the last 3 centuries in what they called their Golden Peace, a period so free of conflict that most species consider them barely more than advanced pacifists with impressive technology. The docking bay of Station Harmony buzzed with activity as delegations from a dozen species gathered to witness the historic ceremony. Zaratil's own people were there in force. Tall, ethereal beings whose hair color communicated emotions as clearly as words. The Terran delegation was smaller, but included several high-ranking officers and diplomats. Her first glimpse of Captain Marcus Chun surprised her. She had expected someone older, perhaps bearing the soft appearance she associated with a peaceful species. Instead, she found herself looking at a man in his early 30s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a bearing that suggested competence rather than comfort. He stood with his shoulders squared, hands clasped behind his back, watching the arriving Velthari delegation with careful attention. When their eyes met across the bay, Zaratil felt an unexpected flutter of something that wasn't entirely political calculation. Marcus stepped forward, offering a formal bow that managed to be respectful without seeming subservient. "Your Highness," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. "I'm honored to meet you. Captain Chun." She inclined her head gracefully. "Though I suppose we should begin using first names, given the circumstances." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Marcus, then. And, may I say, the intelligence briefings didn't do you justice." The comment was borderline inappropriate for a first meeting, but something in his tone suggested sincerity rather than flattery. Zaratil found her hair shifting toward warmer gold tones before she consciously suppressed the response. The next few hours passed in a blur of ceremonies, formal introductions, and negotiations over final details. Through it all, Marcus remained attentive but distant, professional but not cold. When they finally had a few minutes alone before the ceremony, Zaratil decided to address the elephant in the room. "You know this isn't a love match," she said bluntly. Marcus nodded, settling into a chair across from her in the station's diplomatic quarters. "I am aware, but that doesn't mean it has to be entirely transactional either. We're going to be spending significant time together over the next several years. We might as well try to make it pleasant." "Several years?" She raised an eyebrow. "The alliance only requires us to maintain the marriage for 18 standard months." "True," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly. "But I was thinking about what happens after. If this works, if we actually manage to stop the hegemony, there's going to be a lot of rebuilding to do. A lot of questions about how our species interact going forward. Having people who understand both cultures could be valuable." It was a pragmatic response, but Zaratil detected something else underneath, a genuine interest in the possibilities. "You're assuming we'll be successful." "I have to," Marcus replied simply. "The alternative isn't acceptable." The ceremony itself was a carefully choreographed blend of human and Velthari traditions. Zaratil wore traditional robes that shifted through the full spectrum of her people's emotional range, while Marcus appeared in a formal military dress uniform that somehow made him look even more competent than before. When they exchanged vows, the words were political rather than romantic, but Marcus delivered them with such conviction that Zaratil almost believed he meant them personally. The kiss that sealed their union was chaste, but not perfunctory, and when they turned to face the assembled witnesses, she was surprised by how natural it felt to stand beside him. The reception afterward revealed more about Marcus than the ceremony had. He moved through the crowd with diplomatic ease, but Zaratil noticed how he seemed to catalog every person he met, filing away details about their backgrounds and potential usefulness. When an older Velthari nobleman made a subtly dismissive comment about human military capabilities, Marcus responded with such detailed knowledge of recent hegemony tactics that the nobleman quickly changed the subject. "You've done your homework," Zaratil commented when they had a moment alone. "Education is important when you're about to bet your civilization on an alliance," Marcus replied. "Besides, I find your people fascinating. The emotional expression through hair color, the way your society balances individual achievement with collective responsibility, it's remarkably sophisticated. And yet you're willing to tie your future to a species you've just met?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking out at the mixed crowd of humans and Velthari. "Do you know what humans call the period before our golden peace?" Zaratil shook her head. "The bloody centuries," Marcus said softly. 300 years ago, we nearly destroyed ourselves through constant warfare. Every human alive today grew up hearing stories about what happens when we let conflict consume us. We chose peace because we knew the cost of the alternative." "That's admirable," Zaratil said, though she wondered privately how a species could simply choose to abandon their aggressive instincts. "It is," Marcus agreed, "but choosing peace isn't the same as being incapable of war. We remember how to fight, Zara. We just choose not to." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully, but his expression remained calm and pleasant. Still, she found herself thinking about his words later as they prepared to depart the station. The plan was for them to spend the next few weeks aboard Marcus's ship, the Terra Nova, while he introduced her to key figures in the Terran military hierarchy. After that, they would visit several Velthari worlds to cement the alliance from her people's perspective. The Terra Nova was impressive in its own utilitarian way. The ship was clearly designed for extended operations, with redundant systems and enough firepower to handle most threats. What surprised Zaratil was how comfortable the crew seemed around their captain. There was obvious respect and discipline, but also an easy familiarity that spoke to Marcus's leadership style. Her quarters were adjacent to his, connected by a common area that could serve as either a meeting space or a more intimate setting, depending on their needs. Marcus had clearly put thought into making her comfortable. There were Velthari star charts on the walls, and a selection of books about human culture translated into her language. "I thought you might want to understand us better, too," Marcus explained when he showed her around. Their first dinner together was surprisingly pleasant. Marcus was well-read and curious, asking thoughtful questions about Velthari philosophy and culture. In return, he shared stories about human exploration and settlement, painting a picture of a species driven by curiosity rather than conquest. "We've always been explorers," Marcus said over dessert. "Even when we were fighting each other constantly, humans were looking toward the horizon, wondering what was beyond it. Maybe that's why peace came easier to us than it might to other species. We always had somewhere new to go when things got tense." "And yet you're willing to fight now," Zaratil observed. Marcus set down his fork, his expression growing serious. "The hegemony isn't interested in coexistence. They see other species as either tools or obstacles. Given those options, fighting becomes the only choice that lets us remain who we are." Over the following days, Zaratil began to understand why the Terran military had such confidence in their capabilities despite their peaceful reputation. The Terra Nova ran constant training exercises, and she was impressed by the crew's professionalism and adaptability. More than that, she began to see glimpses of something harder underneath the civilized surface. During a simulated combat scenario, she watched Marcus coordinate responses to multiple threats simultaneously, his calm demeanor never wavering even as alerts blared and crew members shouted updates. There was something almost predatory in the way he analyzed the tactical situation, finding weaknesses in enemy positions with unsettling efficiency. "That was impressive," she told him afterward. Marcus shrugged, already focused on reviewing the exercise data. "It's what we trained for, though I hope we won't need to put it into practice." But even as he said it, Zaratil noticed his hand drift unconsciously to the weapon at his side, fingers tracing the grip with practiced familiarity. Whatever piece humanity had chosen, they clearly hadn't forgotten how to prepare for its opposite. The revelation came 3 days later, when they received an emergency transmission from the edge of Velthari space. A hegemony strike force had attacked the outer colonies, testing the newly announced alliance. The message was brief and brutal: surrender the human and the princess, or watch the systematic destruction of every Velthari world. As the bridge crew processed the news, Zaratil watched Marcus's face carefully. For just a moment, his carefully maintained composure slipped, and she saw something that made her blood run cold. It wasn't fear or even anger. It was calculation, swift and merciless, as if he was already planning the most efficient way to solve the problem permanently. "Sir," the communications officer looked to Marcus for orders. Marcus's expression smoothed back into professional calm, but Zaratil had seen what lay beneath it. When he spoke, his voice carried the same pleasant tone she had grown accustomed to, but now she heard the steel underneath. "Set course for the Velthari border," Marcus said calmly, "and send a message to Terra Command. Tell them we may need to remind the galaxy why humans chose peace in the first place." As the Terra Nova changed course, Zaratil found herself wondering if she truly understood what she had married into. The hegemony was about to discover that threatening a human's family, even a family created through political necessity, might be the last mistake they ever made. The journey to the Velthari border took 18 hours, and Zaratil watched her new husband transform during every minute of it. The change was subtle at first. Marcus spoke in shorter sentences. His movements became more precise, and he spent increasing amounts of time studying tactical reports. But as they drew closer to their destination, something fundamental shifted in his demeanor. The pleasant, diplomatic captain who had courted her with careful consideration was being replaced by something else entirely. Not cruel or violent, but focused with an intensity that made her skin prickle. It was like watching a sleeping predator slowly wake up. The hegemony force consists of 12 heavy cruisers and approximately 40 escort vessels, Marcus reported during their final briefing. They've established a perimeter around the Kethlo system and are demanding the immediate surrender of all human personnel in Velthari space. Admiral Telvanni, who had joined them via quantum communication, looked troubled. Captain, with respect to the Alliance, a single human ship cannot engage a force of that magnitude. Perhaps we should consider negotiation. No. The word came out flat and final. Zaratil saw several of the Velthari officers exchange glances at Marcus's tone. The moment we negotiate with terrorists, we teach them that terrorism works. The hegemony needs to understand that attacking civilians is unacceptable. But surely you don't intend to fight them directly? Telvanni pressed. The odds are impossible. Marcus smiled, and Zaratil felt a chill run down her spine. It was the first time she had seen him smile since receiving news of the attack, and there was nothing pleasant about it. Admiral, has your intelligence service briefed you on human military doctrine? Marcus asked politely. Some, Telvanni admitted, but your species has been peaceful for centuries. Surely your modern capabilities are primarily theoretical. Theoretical, Marcus repeated, as if tasting the word. Let me share something with you, Admiral. Humans didn't stop being good at war when we chose peace. We just stopped fighting each other. He gestured to his tactical officer, who brought up a display showing the Terra Nova's specifications. This ship carries more firepower than most hegemony battlegroups. Our shields can withstand direct bombardment from Dreadnought-class weapons. Our engines can outrun anything the hegemony has in service. Even so, another officer objected, 50 ships is a target-rich environment. Marcus interrupted. It means they can't maneuver effectively without risking collision. It means their formations are predictable. It means when they break, they'll run into each other trying to escape. The cold analysis in his voice made Zaratil study her husband with new eyes. This wasn't bravado or reckless courage. This was someone who had spent considerable time thinking about how to kill enemies efficiently. Marcus, she said carefully, perhaps we should contact Earth for additional support before engaging such a large force. He turned to her, and for a moment his expression softened slightly. Zara, I appreciate the concern, but Earth is 3 weeks away even by fastest courier. The people in that system don't have 3 weeks. Then, what are you proposing? Marcus looked back at the tactical display, and when he spoke, his voice carried the certainty of someone stating simple facts. We go in fast and hit them hard. Take out their command ship first, then work through their heavy units while they're trying to reorganize. Classic human tactics, speed, precision, and overwhelming force applied at the point of maximum vulnerability. You're talking about fighting a war, Telvanni protested. No, Marcus Corrective. I'm talking about ending one before it starts. The hegemony thinks they're sending a message by attacking civilians. Time to send a better message back. Zaratil found herself thinking about Marcus's earlier words about choice and capability. She was beginning to understand that human peace wasn't maintained through weakness, but through the conscious decision not to use their strength. Now that decision was being tested. "What do you need from us?" she asked. Marcus glanced at her with something that might have been approval. "Nothing for the initial engagement. This is something the Terra Nova needs to handle alone. But afterward, we'll need your people to help with search and rescue operations." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Zaratiel watched the human crew go through their pre-combat routines with professional efficiency. There was no panic, no hesitation, just methodical preparation for violence on a massive scale. What disturbed her most was how natural it looked. These people had spent their entire lives in peace, but they moved through weapons checks and tactical planning like they had been doing it forever. The realization struck her that maybe they had been, just not against external enemies. "Captain," the navigation officer reported, "we're approaching the system perimeter. Hegemony forces are maintaining blockade formation around Kethlos Prime." "Understood," Marcus replied, settling into his command chair. "Bring us out of hyperspace at maximum tactical distance. All systems to combat readiness." The Terra Nova dropped out of hyperspace 8 light minutes from the hegemony force, far enough away to avoid immediate detection, but close enough for detailed sensor readings. The tactical display lit up with enemy positions. A classic blockade formation with heavy cruisers forming an outer perimeter and lighter ships providing close support. "They're confident," Marcus observed, studying the formation. "Probably justified, given their numerical advantage. But confidence can be a weakness if it leads to complacency." Detecting communication traffic between enemy vessels, the communications officer reported. "Standard patrol chatter. No indication they've spotted us yet." Marcus nodded. "Tactical, I want firing solutions on their command ship and the 3 nearest heavy cruisers." Navigation, plot an approach vector that keeps us in their sensor shadow until we're ready to engage. "Sir," his tactical officer said hesitantly, "regulations require me to remind you that we're about to initiate hostilities against a force that significantly outnumbers us. Protocol suggests requesting additional support before." "Protocol," Marcus interrupted gently, "was written by people who never had to watch civilians die while waiting for reinforcements. I'll take full responsibility for this action." Zaratiel moved closer to Marcus's chair. "Are you certain about this?" He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something in his eyes that made her understand why humans had once conquered half their homeworld before choosing peace. It wasn't bloodlust or anger. It was the absolute certainty of someone who had calculated all possible outcomes and found only one acceptable path forward. "The hegemony is about to learn something that most of the galaxy has forgotten," Marcus said quietly. "Humans don't start wars, Zura, but we do finish them. All stations report ready for combat," his executive officer announced. "Very well." Marcus straightened in his chair, and when he spoke again, his voice carried across the bridge with absolute authority. "Take us in." The Terra Nova accelerated toward the hegemony formation like a guided missile, her advanced engines allowing her to build speed while remaining hidden in the sensor shadows of the system's asteroids. For 20 minutes, they closed distance in complete silence, the enemy fleet growing larger on their displays with each passing second. "Enemy formation is holding position around the planet," Tactical reported. "No change in their alert status. They're not expecting trouble." "Why would they?" Marcus replied. "As far as they know, they're facing a single human ship. They probably think we'll run or surrender." "Contact in 60 seconds," navigation announced. Marcus activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In 60 seconds, we're going to engage a numerically superior enemy force that has attacked civilians under our protection. I know this isn't what most of you train for during peacetime, but I also know that every one of you understands what's at stake here. He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the weight of centuries of human history. Our species chose peace 300 years ago because we understood the cost of endless war. But peace without the strength to defend, it is just surrender by another name. Today, we remind the galaxy why humanity's choice to be peaceful was a gift, not a weakness. 30 seconds to weapons range, tactical announced. Target their command ship first, Marcus ordered. Full spread of heavy torpedoes, followed by concentrated beam fire on their main drives. The moment they start to react, shift targets to the nearest heavy cruiser. Zaratiel gripped the arms of her chair as the Terra Nova burst from the asteroid field like an avenging angel. For a crucial few seconds, the hegemony fleet didn't react, probably couldn't believe that a single ship was attacking them directly. That hesitation cost them dearly. The Terra Nova's opening salvo was devastating in its precision. Heavy torpedoes designed to crack asteroid fortifications slammed into the hegemony command ship's shields, overloading them in seconds. The follow-up beam attack carved through armor plating like it was tissue paper, and secondary explosions began rippling through the enemy vessel's hull. Command ship is disabled. Tactical reported with professional satisfaction. Main drives offline, weapons systems down. She's dead in space. Shift targets, Marcus ordered calmly. Let's say hello to her escorts. The next 10 minutes were the most terrifying of Zaratiel's life. The Terra Nova moved through the hegemony formation like a shark through a school of fish, her weapons finding targets with mechanical precision while enemy fire seemed to barely scratch her shields. Human technology, she realized, was far more advanced than anyone had suspected. But what truly frightened her was Marcus himself. He orchestrated the battle with cool efficiency, calling out targeting priorities and tactical adjustments as if he were conducting a training exercise rather than orchestrating the destruction of dozens of ships. There was no rage, no excitement, just professional competence applied to the art of warfare. Hegemony forces are breaking formation, tactical announced. Multiple vessels requesting permission to withdraw. Denied. Marcus replied without hesitation. No one leaves until they've answered for what they did to those colonies. Sir, his communications officer spoke up. We're receiving surrender requests from 7 hegemony vessels. Marcus considered this for a moment. Patch me through to all enemy ships. A moment later, his voice was broadcasting across the entire system. This is Captain Marcus Chun of the Terran vessel Terra Nova. You came here to send a message about what happens when you threaten human interests. Message received. Now let me send one back. His tone remained perfectly calm and reasonable, which somehow made his words even more chilling. Every ship that participated in attacks on civilian targets will be destroyed. Any vessel that wishes to surrender may do so, but only after they provide complete intelligence on future hegemony operations against Alliance worlds. Captain, one of the hegemony commanders replied, his voice shaky with fear. We were following orders. We had no choice. Everyone has a choice, Marcus interrupted. The people you killed in those colonies had no choice. You did. You chose to follow orders that targeted civilians. Now you get to live with the consequences of that choice. The battle continued for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. By the time the last hegemony vessel either surrendered or was destroyed, the Terra Nova had single-handedly eliminated one of the largest military forces the hegemony had ever assembled. As damage reports came in from both sides, Zaratil found herself staring at her husband with a mixture of awe and terror. In the space of a few hours, he had transformed from a diplomatic bridegroom into something that looked suspiciously like a force of nature. Zura, Marcus said, finally turning away from the tactical displays. "Are you all right?" She nodded slowly, not trusting her voice. The pleasant, careful man she had married was still there, but now she understood what lay beneath the surface. Humanity's golden peace wasn't built on the absence of violence. It was built on the conscious choice to restrain it. "Good," Marcus said, already turning his attention to the next problem, because that was just the opening move. Now, the hegemony knows we're serious about this alliance. They're going to escalate, and we'll be ready for them. Zaratil asked. Marcus smiled again, and this time she didn't flinch. Instead, she found herself feeling sorry for humanity's enemies. They had no idea what they had just awakened. "Oh yes," Marcus said calmly. "We'll be ready." News of the Kethlos engagement spread through galactic civilization like wildfire. Within hours, every major news network was running footage captured by automated monitoring stations. A single human vessel systematically dismantling a hegemony fleet 50 times its size. The implications sent shockwaves through governments across known space. Zaratil watched the coverage from the Terra Nova's observation deck, her hair cycling through colors that reflected her turbulent emotions. The reports were uniformly stunned. Military analysts struggled to explain how humanity had hidden such devastating capabilities for 3 centuries. "They're calling it the Kethlos Massacre," she told Marcus when he joined her. He winced slightly. "I was hoping they'd focus on the strategic implications rather than the body count." "Marcus, you destroyed or disabled 43 ships in 90 minutes. How did you expect them to describe it?" "As a necessary response to terrorism," Marcus replied, settling beside her. "But I suppose massacre gets better ratings." Zaratil studied her husband's profile. Even now, discussing the destruction he had orchestrated, he seemed more concerned with public relations than the lives lost. "Do you feel anything about what happened?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "You're asking if I feel guilt. I suppose I am." "No," he said simply. "Those people made a choice to attack civilians. I made a choice to stop them. The only thing I feel is satisfaction that we prevented them from doing it again." The casualness of his response disturbed her more than anger would have. "You're not the man I married 3 weeks ago." "Yes, I am," Marcus disagreed. "I'm exactly the same person. You're just seeing parts of me that didn't seem relevant during peacetime." He looked at her directly. "Did you think humans became peaceful by forgetting how to fight? Or did you assume we were simply weak?" Before she could answer, his communications officer's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. Admiral Harrison requests immediate conference." Marcus sighed. "So it begins. Put him through to conference room 1. Admiral Harrison appeared on the holographic display, looking haggard and concerned. Behind him, Zaratil could see parts of what was clearly a crisis management center, with staff members hurrying between stations and multiple screens showing news coverage of the battle. "Captain Chun," Harrison began without preamble, "what the hell did you do out there?" "I protected Alliance civilians from terrorist attack," Marcus replied calmly, "as per my standing orders regarding threats to human interests." "Marcus, you just revealed capabilities that were supposed to remain classified for another 50 years. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to the balance of power in this galaxy?" Zaratil watched the exchange with growing fascination. The Admiral was clearly furious, but there was something else in his tone, a weariness that suggested this conversation had been anticipated. The balance of power was already shifting, Marcus pointed out. The hegemony was expanding unchecked, while everyone else hoped someone else would solve the problem. Now they know that's not an option. The Galactic Council is demanding explanations. 3 different species have formally requested information about human military capabilities. The Zephyrian ambassador actually used the word threat when referring to Earth. Good, Marcus said bluntly. Maybe now they'll take the hegemony seriously instead of assuming diplomacy will solve everything. Admiral Harrison rubbed his forehead. Marcus, I need you to understand something. The decision to reveal our capabilities was supposed to be made at the highest levels of government, not by a single ship captain responding to a tactical situation. With respect, sir, the decision was made the moment the hegemony attacked civilians under our protection. Everything that followed was just implementation. Zaratiel saw Harrison's expression soften slightly. You know, I can't officially approve of what you did. I understand, sir. Unofficially, Harrison's voice dropped. Well done, Captain. It's been a long time since anyone reminded the galaxy why Earth doesn't get invaded. After the transmission ended, Zaratiel found herself looking at Marcus with new eyes. How long have you been planning this? Planning what? The reveal. This was never just about stopping one hegemony fleet, was it? You wanted to change how the galaxy sees humanity. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Zara, for 3 centuries, humans have been treated like a useful but ultimately harmless species. Good for trade, reliable in negotiations, but not really significant players in galactic politics. That was acceptable when there weren't any major threats to civilized space. But now there are. The hegemony isn't going to be stopped by trade agreements or diplomatic protests. They understand one language, and it isn't standard galactic. Someone had to be willing to speak their language fluently. Over the following days, the political ramifications of Kethlos became apparent. The Galactic Council convened emergency sessions to discuss humanity's hidden militarization. Several species that had previously been neutral in the growing conflict with the hegemony suddenly announced their support for the alliance. More concerning, 3 minor powers formally requested military assistance from Earth for defensive purposes only. We're getting requests for protection from 17 different worlds, Marcus reported during one of their evening briefings. Apparently, word has spread that humans are now actively defending their allies. That's good news, isn't it? Zaratiel asked. It would be, if we had the ships to actually provide that protection. The Terra Nova is powerful, but she's still just one vessel. The hegemony has hundreds of fleets scattered across their territory. What about the rest of the human fleet? Marcus smiled grimly. That's the beautiful irony of our situation. We've been so convincingly peaceful that most of our ships are actually exploration vessels with minimal military modifications. The Terra Nova is equipped for extended deep space operations, which requires heavy defensive capabilities. Most human ships are designed for surveying star systems and conducting diplomatic missions. So we're bluffing? Not entirely. Human industrial capacity is considerable, and our technology base is more advanced than most species realize. But converting a civilization from peaceful exploration to military readiness takes time we may not have. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert from the bridge. Captain, we're detecting multiple hyperspace signatures. Large vessels, approaching fast. Marcus was out of his chair and moving before the communication ended. Hegemony. Unknown, sir. Signatures don't match any known hegemony configurations. They reached the bridge to find controlled chaos. Sensor displays showed 17 massive vessels dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The ships were unlike anything in the current galactic databases, sleek, predatory designs that seemed built for one purpose. Sir, the tactical officer reported, Those ships are broadcasting human identification codes. What? Marcus moved to the tactical station. That's impossible. There are no human military vessels in this sector. Actually, a new voice said over the communication system, there are now. The main screen activated to show a woman in her 60s wearing a uniform that was similar to Marcus's but with additional insignia. Her expression was stern but not unfriendly. Captain Shun, I'm Admiral Sarah Webb, commanding the 1st Expeditionary Fleet. Permission to come aboard. Marcus looked stunned. Ma'am, I wasn't aware that a 1st Expeditionary Fleet existed. It didn't, until yesterday. Funny how quickly bureaucracies can move when properly motivated. An hour later, Zaratil found herself in the Terra Nova's main briefing room, watching Marcus try to process information that was clearly reorganizing his understanding of his own civilization. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Marcus said slowly. In the 72 hours since the Kethlos engagement, Earth has activated 17 previously unknown military vessels and created an entirely new fleet command structure. That's correct, Admiral Webb replied, though unknown might not be the right word. Let's say reclassified instead. Reclassified from what? Deep space research platforms, mostly. It turns out that when you build ships designed to operate independently in unknown space for extended periods, you end up with something that looks suspiciously like a heavy cruiser. Zaratil watched the exchange with growing amazement. How many such research platforms does Earth operate? Currently? About 300. Give us another month, and that number goes up significantly. 300, Marcus repeated slowly. We have 300 ships that can be converted to military use. Actually, Admiral Webb corrected, we have 300 ships that already are military vessels. We just haven't been calling them that. The implications hit Marcus visibly. The entire human exploration fleet is actually a stealth military force. Not stealth, Admiral Webb disagreed. We've never hidden what these ships can do. We just haven't emphasized their combat capabilities because we haven't needed to. Until now, Zaratil said softly. Until now, Admiral Webb agreed. Captain Shun, your actions at Kethlos have effectively ended humanity's period of voluntary pacifism. Earth has decided that if we're going to be seen as a military power regardless, we might as well be an effective one. The meeting continued for several more hours, covering strategic deployments, communication protocols, and coordination with Velthari forces. Throughout it all, Zaratil found herself reassessing everything she thought she knew about humanity. They hadn't been hiding their military capabilities. They had simply been so focused on peaceful applications that their military potential had become invisible to outside observers. Now that potential was being revealed, and the galaxy was discovering that humanity's 3 centuries of peace had been maintained by choice, not necessity. After Admiral Webb departed to coordinate with other fleet elements, Marcus and Zaratil found themselves alone in the observation lounge. I owe you an apology, she said finally. For what? For assuming your people were weak. For thinking that peace meant you had forgotten how to fight. Marcus looked out at the stars, where the lights of the 1st Expeditionary Fleet were visible as moving points against the darkness. We didn't forget, Zura. We just chose to focus on other things. But choice implies the ability to choose differently when circumstances change. And circumstances have definitely changed. Yes, Marcus agreed. The question is whether we can change quickly enough to make a difference. As if summoned by his words, another alert came from the bridge. Captain, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the hegemony border. It appears they're launching simultaneous attacks against 17 Alliance worlds. Marcus straightened, and Zaratil saw the transformation happen again, the diplomat disappearing and the warrior emerging. "Time to find out," he said grimly. "Sir," the communications officer added, "Admiral Webb requests permission to coordinate a joint response." Marcus smiled, and this time Zaratiel didn't find the expression disturbing. Instead, she felt a surge of sympathy for humanity's enemies. They had picked a fight with a species that had spent 3 centuries preparing for war while calling it peace. "Tell the Admiral that the Terra Nova stands ready for fleet operations," Marcus replied, "and send a message to the Hegemony High Command." "What should the message say, sir?" Marcus looked at Zaratiel, then back at his crew. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of 3 centuries of restrained power finally being unleashed. "Tell them that humanity is no longer choosing to be peaceful." The simultaneous hegemony attacks on 17 Alliance worlds marked the beginning of what historians would later call the 3-Day War. But as Zaratiel watched humanity's response unfold from the bridge of the Terra Nova, she realized that calling it a war was like calling a hurricane a light breeze. Within 6 hours of receiving the distress signals, human forces had deployed to all 17 systems under attack. What should have been impossible, covering such vast distances and coordinating such complex operations in real time, was happening with mechanical precision. "How is this possible?" she asked Marcus as they watched tactical displays showing human ships arriving at battlefields scattered across 2 spiral arms of the galaxy. "Quantum entanglement communications," Marcus replied, his attention divided between multiple data streams. "Every human ship carries quantum-linked communication arrays. Real-time coordination across any distance, completely secure." "That technology doesn't exist," Zaratiel protested. "The energy requirements alone would be manageable if you had 3 centuries to develop fusion technology without worrying about building weapons," Marcus finished. "Turns out peaceful civilizations can devote a lot of resources to solving theoretical physics problems." The first reports from the battle zones were uniformly devastating for the hegemony. Human forces weren't just winning. They were achieving victory margins that defied conventional military understanding. Single human ships were engaging and defeating entire hegemony battle groups with minimal casualties. Admiral Webb reports the Curlian system is secure, the communications officer announced. Hegemony forces destroyed or in retreat. Human casualties, 0. Carthage system reports similar results, another officer added. Commander Okafor's task force eliminated 37 hegemony vessels in 14 minutes. Zaratiel found herself studying the tactical readouts with growing disbelief. "Marcus, these numbers can't be accurate. Your forces are outnumbered 5-1 in most engagements, but you're winning with casualty ratios of 50-1. Human military doctrine emphasizes force multiplication," Marcus explained calmly. "Superior technology, better training, and tactical flexibility. It's a combination that's hard to counter if you're not prepared for it. But the hegemony has been preparing for war for decades. Their entire society is militarized." "Their society is militarized," Marcus agreed. "Ours is optimized. There's a significant difference." As the hours passed, the scope of human capabilities became increasingly clear. Ships appeared and disappeared across the galaxy as if distance was meaningless. Tactical coordination between widely separated forces operated with impossible precision. Most disturbing of all, human forces seemed to anticipate hegemony moves before they were made. "Captain," the tactical officer called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Hegemony Supreme Command. They're requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "After 18 hours of combat? That seems premature." "Sir," His intelligence officer spoke up. Our listening posts indicate significant panic in hegemony command structure. They're reporting complete breakdown of strategic coordination and requesting emergency reinforcement from their core systems. Show me the overall tactical picture, Marcus ordered. The main display shifted to show a galaxy-wide view of the conflict. Hegemony positions were marked in red, alliance forces in blue, and human deployments in gold. What Zaratil saw made her understand why the enemy was panicking. Human forces weren't just responding to hegemony attacks. They were simultaneously striking deep into hegemony territory. While defending Alliance worlds, they had somehow found the resources to launch offensive operations against 17 major hegemony military installations. You're fighting on 34 fronts simultaneously, she said in amazement. Technically 37, Marcus corrected. We have reconnaissance forces conducting harassment operations in 3 additional sectors. That should be impossible. No civilization has the resources to sustain operations on that scale. Marcus turned to look at her directly. Zara, how many human ships did you think existed before this week? She had to think about it. Intelligence estimates suggested maybe 50 or 60 vessels, all exploratory or diplomatic craft. Earth maintains an active fleet of over 800 ships, Marcus said calmly. Every one of them capable of independent operations for extended periods. Most carry fabrication equipment that allows them to manufacture their own ammunition and replacement parts. Several can construct additional vessels given sufficient raw materials and time. The numbers were staggering, but what truly frightened Zaratil was the implication. You're saying humanity has been maintaining a fleet of 800 military vessels while convincing everyone you were pacifists. We've been maintaining a fleet of 800 ships designed for peaceful exploration in dangerous environments, Marcus corrected. The fact that such ships are extremely effective in military applications is merely a consequence of practical engineering. Another alert interrupted their conversation. Captain, Admiral Webb is requesting conference with all task force commanders. Priority 1. The holographic display activated to show Admiral Webb's command bridge, which had clearly been modified for fleet operations. Behind her, multiple screens showed real-time updates from across the galaxy. Ladies and gentlemen, Webb began without preamble. The Hegemony Supreme Command has formally requested ceasefire negotiations through the Galactic Council. They're claiming that continuation of hostilities will result in unnecessary loss of life and destabilization of galactic civilization. Interesting choice of words, someone commented from another ship. Considering they started this war. My thoughts exactly, Commander Torres, Webb agreed. Which is why I'm recommending we decline their request. Marcus leaned forward. Admiral, if they're ready to negotiate, shouldn't we consider? They're not ready to negotiate, Webb interrupted. They're ready to buy time while they figure out how to counter our capabilities. Intelligence indicates they're repositioning their core fleet elements for a major offensive. How major? Another commander asked. Complete mobilization, Webb replied grimly. Every hegemony military asset, including their strategic reserves. We're looking at potentially 3,000 ships. The number hung in the air for a moment. Even with their technological advantages, 3,000 ships represented a significant challenge for human forces. Recommendations? Webb asked. And this before they can mobilize, Marcus said immediately. Hit their core systems now, while their forces are dispersed. Agreed. Several other commanders responded simultaneously. That would mean striking directly at hegemony homeworlds, Webb pointed out. Civilian populations, infrastructure targets. It's a significant escalation. Marcus's expression didn't change. Admiral, the hegemony opened this war by targeting civilian colonies. They've made it clear that they don't distinguish between military and civilian targets. Why should we? Zaratil felt a chill at the casual way he discussed attacking entire worlds. Marcus, you're talking about billions of lives. I'm talking about ending a war quickly rather than letting it drag on for years, Marcus replied. Every day this conflict continues, more people die. If striking strategic targets in hegemony space prevents a prolonged campaign, it's the humane choice. The humanitarian choice is to avoid escalation, Zaratil argued. The humanitarian choice, Marcus said firmly, is to ensure this never happens again. The only way to do that is to make the cost of aggression so high that no one considers it worthwhile. Admiral Webb studied the debate through the holographic link. Princess Zaratil, what's the Velthari position on escalation? Zaratil found herself in an impossible situation. Her people had entered this alliance to protect themselves from hegemony expansion, but she hadn't anticipated the scope of human capabilities or their willingness to use them. The Velthari Council supports whatever action is necessary to ensure the security of Alliance worlds, she said carefully. That's not an answer, Marcus observed. It's the only answer I can give without consulting my government, Zaratil replied. This situation has moved far beyond anything we anticipated when we signed the alliance agreement. Webb nodded understanding. Captain Shun, how long would you need to prepare for operations against hegemony core systems? 6 hours, Marcus replied immediately. Less if we're willing to accept higher risks. And your assessment of likely outcomes? Marcus was quiet for a moment, clearly running calculations. Complete hegemony military collapse within 72 hours. Their command structure isn't designed to handle simultaneous pressure on multiple core systems. They'll either surrender unconditionally or fragment into isolated resistance groups. Casualties? Military casualties will be significant, but acceptable. Civilian casualties depend on how quickly their government chooses to surrender. The casual discussion of such massive destruction was surreal to Zaratil. These people were planning the potential conquest of an entire interstellar empire, as if they were organizing a supply run. Very well, Admiral Webb decided. All task forces will prepare for Operation Thunderstrike. Target packages will be distributed within the hour. Any objections? No one objected. Within minutes, human forces across the galaxy began repositioning for what would either be the final phase of the war or its most catastrophic escalation. As the conference ended, Zaratil found herself alone with Marcus in the observation lounge. Outside, she could see other human ships moving into formation, their running lights creating geometric patterns against the stars. Do you ever wonder if this is what your ancestors felt like? She asked. Which ancestors? The ones from the bloody centuries. The ones who fought so many wars that humanity chose peace. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Every day, he said finally. But the difference is that we remember why we chose peace. We're not fighting because we enjoy it. We're fighting because the alternative is watching civilized space fall to people who don't share our values. And when it's over, when the hegemony is defeated, what happens to all this military capability you've revealed? We hope we never have to use it again, Marcus replied. But we keep it just in case. Peace through strength, Zara. It's the only peace that lasts. 18 hours later, Operation Thunderstrike began with simultaneous strikes against 47 hegemony core systems. The attack was overwhelming in its scope and devastating in its effectiveness. Within 6 hours, the hegemony's central government had collapsed, and within 12 hours, surrender offers were being broadcast from every major hegemony world. The three-day war was over. Humanity had won a victory so complete that it would reshape galactic politics for centuries to come. But as Zaratil watched the surrender broadcasts, she found herself thinking about the sleeping dragon in ancient Earth legends. It had awakened, dealt with the threat, and was now settling back into slumber. The question was whether the galaxy would be wise enough to let it sleep. 3 months after the end of the three-day war, Zaratil stood in the gardens of the New Geneva Peace Institute, watching her husband address the assembled representatives of 47 galactic civilizations. The gathering was unprecedented. Never before had so many species convened to discuss the fundamental principles of interstellar relations. Marcus looked comfortable at the podium, but Zaratil could see the subtle signs of tension in his posture. The past 3 months had transformed him from a ship captain into something approaching a galactic statesman, and the weight of that responsibility showed in the careful precision of his words. The three-day war ended not because humanity desired conquest, Marcus was saying, but because the galaxy needed to understand that aggression against civilian populations would not be tolerated. The peace we've achieved is not a human peace. It's a galactic peace maintained by the collective commitment of all civilized species. The response from the audience was politely attentive, but Zaratil could sense the underlying tension. Every species present was still adjusting to the reality of human military supremacy, and many were struggling with how to maintain their independence while acknowledging the new balance of power. Ambassador Vextai of the Regelian Confederation raised a questioning appendage. Captain Chun, the human military response was remarkably swift and effective. Many of our governments are concerned about the implications for galactic sovereignty. Marcus smiled, and Zaratil was relieved to see that it was his diplomatic smile rather than the predatory expression she had learned to associate with his combat planning. Ambassador, human forces withdrew from all non-hegemony systems within 48 hours of the ceasefire. We have no interest in occupying other worlds or imposing human governance on other species. But you retain the capability to do so, Ambassador Thelvar of the Centauri Alliance pointed out. The galaxy has seen what human military technology can accomplish. How do we know you won't use it for conquest rather than peacekeeping? The same way we knew for 3 centuries, Marcus replied calmly. Because we choose not to. Human civilization is based on the principle that strength should be used to protect rather than dominate. That hasn't changed. Yet the galaxy has changed, another representative interjected. The hegemony controlled nearly 18% of known space. What happens to those systems now? This was the question that had dominated galactic politics since the war's end. The collapse of the hegemony had left a power vacuum encompassing hundreds of star systems and billions of people. Various species had put forward proposals for partition, occupation, or trusteeship, but none had gained widespread support. The former hegemony worlds will govern themselves, Marcus announced, causing a stir throughout the audience. Humanity has no interest in administering conquered territory. However, we will maintain peacekeeping forces in the region to ensure that no new aggressive power emerges to fill the vacuum. For how long? Ambassador Vextai asked. As long as necessary, Marcus replied. The peace we've established is not temporary. It's the foundation for a new era of galactic civilization. After the session ended, Zaratil walked with Marcus through the Institute's gardens. The facility had been constructed in record time, a joint project of human engineering and Velthari aesthetics, and it served as a tangible symbol of the alliance that had changed everything. That went better than I expected, Marcus commented. They're still afraid of you, Zaratil observed. All of them. Fear isn't necessarily a bad thing, as long as it's balanced with respect. The galaxy needs to understand that while human military power is vast, it's not arbitrary. They paused beside a fountain that combined flowing water with Velthari light sculptures, creating patterns that shifted with the time of day. It was peaceful and beautiful, but Zaratil found herself thinking about the contrast between the serene setting and the devastating efficiency with which Marcus had prosecuted the war. "Do you miss it?" she asked suddenly. "Miss what?" "The war. The certainty. For 3 days, you knew exactly what needed to be done and had the power to do it. Now everything is negotiations and compromises." Marcus considered this carefully. "I miss the clarity," he admitted. "War is terrible, but it's also simple. The objectives are clear, the methods are direct, and success is measurable. Peace is much more complicated. But you prefer it?" "I prefer it," Marcus confirmed, "though I sometimes wonder if I'm good at it. Admiral Webb keeps sending me intelligence reports about potential threats, and my instinct is always to solve them with overwhelming force." "Like the Corvani situation?" "Exactly like the Corvani situation." Marcus's expression darkened slightly. 37 ships isn't a fleet. It's barely a patrol group. But everyone's treating it like it's the prelude to another major war. The Corvani Collective had begun assembling military forces near the former hegemony border, ostensibly for regional security. While their total strength was negligible compared to human capabilities, their mobilization had triggered alarm throughout the galaxy. "Maybe they're testing you," Zaratil suggested, "seeing how you'll respond to a smaller provocation." "Maybe, but testing human resolve seems like a remarkably poor survival strategy, given recent events." They were interrupted by the arrival of Zaratil's aide, who approached with a deferential posture that indicated urgent business. "Your Highness, you have a priority communication from the Velthari Council." The message was brief, but significant. The Velthari government was formally requesting human assistance in mediating a border dispute with the Saurian Empire, a conflict that had been simmering for decades without resolution. "They want us to solve their territorial problems?" Marcus asked after reviewing the details. "They want you to solve them," Zaratil corrected. "The request specifically asked for your personal involvement." Marcus looked puzzled. "I'm a military officer, not a diplomat. Why would they want me mediating civilian disputes?" "Because you ended a galactic war in 3 days," Zaratil replied. "Because when you speak, people listen. Because they're afraid of what might happen if they don't listen. That's not diplomacy. That's intimidation. Sometimes they're the same thing." The truth of her words became apparent over the following weeks as Marcus found himself increasingly drawn into galactic politics. Species that had spent centuries in territorial disputes suddenly discovered the value of negotiation when human mediation was offered. Trade conflicts that had resisted resolution for decades were settled within days of human involvement. It was during one such mediation session that Zaratil finally understood the full scope of what the 3-day war had accomplished. She was observing negotiations between the Altarian Republic and the Vegan Confederacy over mining rights in a contested asteroid field when the breakthrough moment came. "The Confederacy's position is completely unreasonable," the Altarian representative was arguing. "Their claims have no basis in interstellar law." "Interstellar law is a human concept," the vegan delegate replied dismissively. "Why should we be bound by alien legal frameworks?" Marcus had been listening to the exchange with patient attention, but at this point he leaned forward slightly. "Are you suggesting that interstellar law doesn't apply to your government?" "I'm suggesting that the Vegan Confederacy recognizes only those laws that serve our interests," the delegate replied defiantly. The room fell silent. Marcus's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. When he spoke, his voice carried the same calm tone that had preceded the destruction of the hegemony fleet. "That's an interesting position," Marcus said quietly. "I'm curious how it aligns with your government's desire to remain part of the galactic community." The vegan delegate's bravado evaporated almost instantly. "Captain Shun, I didn't mean to imply. I think you were quite clear," Marcus interrupted gently. "You consider yourselves above the law when it's convenient. The question is whether the galaxy considers that acceptable." Within hours, the Vegan Confederacy had agreed to binding arbitration of the mining dispute. More significantly, they had formally endorsed the principle that interstellar law applied equally to all civilized species. "You didn't threaten them," Zaratiel observed afterward. "I didn't need to," Marcus replied. "They understand the implications of being considered outside the galactic community. No one wants to be classified as a rogue state when humanity is setting the standards for civilized behavior." "Is that what you're doing? Setting standards?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I suppose we are. Not intentionally, but by default. When you're strong enough to enforce your principles, those principles tend to become universal." The observation troubled Zaratiel more than she expected. "Doesn't that bother you? The fact that galactic civilization is essentially restructuring itself around human values." "It would bother me if our values weren't objectively better than the alternatives," Marcus said bluntly. "But given the choice between human standards and hegemony standards, I don't think the selection is difficult. But what about species that want to choose their own standards? They're welcome to, as long as those standards don't involve attacking their neighbors or oppressing their own populations. Human power comes with human responsibility. We can't enforce civilized behavior selectively." 6 months after the war's end, the new galactic order had largely stabilized. The former hegemony territories had reorganized themselves into a dozen smaller republics, all operating under human-supervised peacekeeping agreements. Trade disputes were being resolved through arbitration rather than force. Even traditional rivals were finding diplomatic solutions to conflicts that had previously seemed intractable. It was, Zaratiel realized, exactly the kind of peace that humanity had practiced for 3 centuries, maintained through the clear understanding that the alternatives were unacceptable. "You've succeeded beyond anyone's expectations," she told Marcus as they reviewed the latest diplomatic reports. "Have we?" Marcus looked up from a proposal for establishing permanent peacekeeping stations throughout the galaxy. "Sometimes I wonder if we've just replaced one form of tyranny with another. A tyranny that prevents wars and protects civilians. A tyranny nonetheless. When civilized behavior is enforced rather than chosen, is it still civilized?" The question was philosophical rather than practical, but it spoke to something that had been troubling Zaratiel for months. Human power was being used responsibly, but it was still absolute power in practical terms. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in centuries, but that peace existed at human sufferance. "Does it matter?" she asked finally. "If the result is peace and prosperity?" Marcus set down the proposal and looked out at the stars visible through their quarter's viewport. "I suppose it matters because someday it will be tested. Some species will decide that human oversight is unacceptable and challenge our authority. When that happens, we'll have to decide whether to maintain peace through force or allow the galaxy to return to chaos. And what will you choose?" Marcus's smile was tired but determined. "We'll choose peace, Zura, whatever it costs, whatever it requires. Because the alternative is returning to the bloody centuries, and humanity remembers what that was like." A year after their marriage, Zaratiel finally understood what she had married into. not just a man or even a species, but a principle, the idea that civilization was worth whatever price was necessary to defend it. The humans had chosen peace 3 centuries ago not from weakness, but from wisdom, understanding that true peace required the strength to maintain it. Now, they had extended that choice to the galaxy itself. Whether other species accepted it willingly or under duress, the result was the same. A universe where aggression was impossible and cooperation was inevitable. As she watched Marcus review another mediation request, Zaratiel realized that her hair had shifted to the deep gold of contentment mixed with silver threads of respect. She had married a human to preserve peace, and in doing so, she had helped unleash the force that would maintain peace for generations to come. The dragon was sleeping again, but its presence ensured that no one would disturb the quiet.